Before you go any further in life, I need you to hear something most people never realize. Your first spiritual awakening didn't happen in adulthood. It happened when you were a child. Yes, long before you could spell the word universe. The universe was already speaking to you. Every strange feeling you had, every dream that felt too real, every moment where you felt different from everyone else. Those were not accidents. Those were early signals, early activations, the first marks of a higher destiny trying to wake you up. Think back for a moment. You remember those scenes from your childhood that still follow you even today? The moments that felt heavier than your small body could handle, the silence you never understood, the pain that felt bigger than the situation, the sudden deep thoughts no child should have. All of that was the universe reaching out and touching your consciousness before the world could program it. You were not just growing up, you were being awakened. And now, in this video, you're about to understand exactly why it happened, what it meant, and how it shaped your entire destiny long before you even knew the meaning of the word shift. Let's begin. 1. You were never random. Your childhood was the first activation code. The universe does not operate on coincidence. It does not drop souls anywhere without intention. Long before you took your first breath, your soul was aligned with a specific environment, a specific family system, a specific cultural energy, and even a specific timeline in history. You were placed exactly where you were meant to begin, not because it was perfect, but because it contained the ingredients required to activate the earliest layers of your consciousness. What happened in your childhood was not accidental. It was the first programming sequence the universe fed into your mind and spirit. Every moment, every emotion, every person, every struggle, and every spark of joy was part of the initiation. The universe was shaping the lens through which you would view life. The home you grew up in, whether it was peaceful or chaotic, loud or quiet, loving or distant, carried the precise vibrations needed for your soul's early development. Your childhood wasn't simply a series of events. It was the first classroom where your spirit learned how to feel, how to react, how to sense danger, how to recognize love, how to handle disappointment, and how to interpret the world around you. This was your first activation, your first shift, long before you even knew what consciousness or awakening meant. Some children are born into instability because their life path requires early resilience. They learn early what it means to survive, to adapt, to grow stronger from pressure. Others are born into silence or emotional distance because they must develop an inner world that is powerful and self-sustaining. Some arrive with a sensitive heart because they are meant to become healers, empaths, or emotional guides for others. Their soul needs to feel deeply so they can understand others deeply. And then there are those who feel different from the very beginning, children who never fully fit in, who observe more than they speak, who sense things others ignore, who feel older than their age. These children are not here to repeat the patterns of their family or society. They are here to break them. They carry frequencies that do not match the environment they were born into because their soul originates from a higher timeline of consciousness. This is why certain memories from your childhood feel heavy, meaningful, or strangely unforgettable. They were not accidental. They were code early teachings, first downloads, hidden signals preparing you for the awakening you would experience later in life. And this is the truth most people never realize. The universe begins shaping your destiny long before you understand what destiny even is. Your childhood was the universe marking you, aligning you, and preparing you. Nothing about where you started was random. The circumstances may have felt confusing or painful, but your soul knew exactly why it was placed there. You weren't a mistake. You weren't a coincidence. You were designed. You were positioned. You were coded. 3. Certain people were cosmic messengers in disguise. When you look back at your childhood, there are people you still remember vividly, even if they were in your life for a short moment. A teacher who noticed something special in you, a friend who suddenly disappeared. A relative whose words hurt you more than they should have. A stranger who said something that seemed simple at the time but stayed in your mind for years. These people were not random. The universe does not send human beings into your life accidentally, especially in the early stages of your development. Childhood is the first spiritual crossroads where your path intersects with specific souls carrying specific lessons. Each of them enters your timeline for a purpose, and their presence leaves an imprint far deeper than most people realize. Some people came into your life to awaken something inside you. They might have encouraged you, believed in you, or made you feel seen when no one else did. Their presence was like a spark that reminded your soul of its worth, almost as if they were placed there to prevent your light from going out too early. These individuals acted like mirrors, reflecting back to you the strength, intelligence, or potential you didn't yet understand. Even if their role was small, their impact was enormous because they awakened a part of you that might have stayed asleep without them. Others entered your life to teach you boundaries, self-respect, or emotional strength. They hurt you, betrayed you, left you out, or made you feel small. But in the quantum design of destiny, their role was not to destroy you. It was to shape you. Painful people are often the universe's strictest teachers. They force you to develop emotional muscles. They help you recognize red flags. They push you to learn the difference between love and attachment, kindness and weakness, loyalty and self-sacrifice. Without these experiences, many people remain naive, vulnerable, or overly trusting their whole lives. But the universe marked you early by sending you these challenging souls so that your awakening would begin long before adulthood. There were also souls whose presence was brief, but deeply meaningful. Perhaps it was a moment of kindness from someone you barely knew, a smile, a helping hand, a comforting phrase. These tiny interactions were not meaningless. They were cosmic nudges, little reminders that you were guided and watched over even when you felt alone. In quantum terms, these are entangled souls, beings you have crossed paths with in multiple lifetimes. They show up right when you need them, even if just for a moment, to deliver the energy or message your spirit requires. And then there were the people who simply showed you what you did not want to become. Their mistakes became warnings. Their bitterness became lessons. Their negativity became motivation. These individuals played a negative role externally, but a positive role internally. They shaped your inner compass. They helped you recognize the values you wanted to carry and the ones you never wanted to inherit. Every soul that entered your childhood timeline carried a function. The universe orchestrated these connections with precision, placing you around people who would activate your emotional intelligence, shape your intuition, strengthen your boundaries, and awaken your deeper awareness. Even the people who left early were part of the plan. Their disappearance created space for new paths, new emotions, new identities to form. In many ways, the universe used these early relationships to prepare you for the complexity of adulthood long before you arrive there. This is why certain faces, voices, or memories stay with you even now. They were not just people, they were messengers. Their presence was coded into your timeline before you were even born. Their purpose was to shift you, teach you, evolve you, hurt you, heal you, or simply mark you so deeply that your soul would remember the lesson forever. No one was random. No one was accidental. Everyone carried a message meant only for you. Your childhood wasn't a collection of people. It was a collection of signs. The universe spoke to you through human beings long before you discovered your own inner voice. 4. Your childhood curiosity was your soul remembering itself. Children aren't just curious because they're young. They're curious because they're still close to the source they came from. Before society teaches them limitations, before fear programs their mind, before logic replaces imagination, children live in a state of natural connection to the universe. Their curiosity is not random. It is memory. It is intuition. It is the soul trying to speak before the world teaches it to stay silent. Think about the things you were drawn to as a child. Maybe you loved the stars, the sky, the moon, or the idea of other worlds. Maybe you were fascinated by animals, nature, art, or the mysteries of life. Maybe you daydreamed constantly, imagining realities that didn't exist physically, but felt real inwardly. Those dreams weren't fantasies. They were reflections of where your soul had been before you arrived here. Children don't invent magic, they remember it. Your curiosity was the earliest glimpse of your true frequency. Before you developed self-doubt, before you absorbed family expectations, before fear entered your mind, you existed in a pure state of awareness. You asked endless questions not because you were annoying or naive, but because your soul was trying to reconnect the pieces of knowledge it already carried. When a child touches something, stares at something, or becomes obsessed with something, they are responding to familiar energy. They are drawn to what matches their original vibration. Perhaps you were a quiet observer who noticed details others missed, facial expressions, shifts in energy, changes in mood. That wasn't just sensitivity, it was intuition. Your soul was remembering how it navigated the universe before entering this physical form. Maybe you were the type of child who asked deep, uncomfortable questions. Where do we come from? Why do people suffer? What happens after we die? Adults often dismiss these questions, but they are signs of an old soul awakening early. Children remember the spiritual world more clearly because they haven't been fully shaped by the physical one. Even the things that frightened you as a child carried meaning. Certain dreams, shadows, sounds, or feelings may have made your heart race, not because they were dangerous, but because they were unfamiliar to your physical self, while still familiar to your spiritual self. Fear is often just the mind struggling to translate something the soul already understands. What scared you was not darkness. It was the vastness of your own awareness trying to reconnect with a body that wasn't ready to hold it yet. Your imagination was not foolishness, it was communication. When you created worlds in your mind, gave personalities to objects, or believed you could talk to invisible friends, these weren't childlike fantasies. They were the remnants of your connection to higher realms, spiritual dimensions, or past experiences your consciousness had before being born. Children have access to layers of reality adults can't see because their awareness has not been closed, filtered, or dimmed. Yet a child's imagination is the universe's way of keeping their inner world alive until they're old enough to interpret it. As you grew older, responsibilities, fears, and society's expectations began to quiet your natural connection. But the echoes of that early curiosity never disappeared. They show up today as your deepest interests, your strongest instincts, your spiritual hunger, and your desire to understand the bigger picture of life. The questions you ask now are the adult version of the questions you asked as a child. The things that fascinate you today are the evolved forms of what fascinated you back then. Nothing has changed. You simply grew into the curiosity your soul planted earlier. This is why your childhood dreams and passions feel so sacred when you remember them. They are not memories, they are messages. They are clues. They are fragments of your original self, reminding you who you were before the world told you who to be. Your childhood curiosity was not an accident. It was the universe giving you hints about your soul's identity, your purpose, your gifts, and your path. You weren't just exploring as a child. You were remembering. You were reconnecting. You were awakening. Your curiosity was your first language with the universe, a conversation your soul began long before you understood the words. 5. The universe hid strength inside your weaknesses. When you look back at your childhood, you might remember the parts of yourself that felt like flaws. Maybe you were too sensitive. Maybe you cried easily. Maybe you felt everything too deeply. Maybe you overthought every situation, replaying conversations in your mind long after everyone else forgot. Maybe you were shy, quiet, or introverted, while other children were loud and carefree. Maybe you felt awkward, misunderstood, or different without knowing why. At the time, these qualities felt like weaknesses. They made you feel small. They made you feel out of place. They made you wonder what was wrong with you. But here is the deeper truth. The universe hid your greatest strengths inside the very traits you disliked most. Children cannot understand spiritual engineering, but that doesn't mean it isn't happening. What your mind perceived as weakness, your soul recognized as preparation. Every soft part of you was placed there with intention. Every sensitivity had purpose. Every fear carried direction. The universe does not reveal your strengths openly when you are young. Instead, it hides them inside traits that seem burdensome, confusing, or embarrassing. Why? Because the soul must grow into its power. It must learn to hold strength through understanding, not ego. Power discovered too early becomes arrogance. Power discovered too easily becomes ignorance. But power discovered through struggle becomes wisdom. If you were sensitive as a child, it was because your soul needed heightened emotional awareness. Sensitivity is not weakness. It is an advanced form of perception. Sensitive children pick up signals others miss. They notice the tone behind words, the tension in the room, the pain someone is trying to hide, the love someone is afraid to show. Sensitivity is emotional intelligence in its rawest form. It means your heart was decoding reality long before your mind learned how to explain it. The universe gave you a soft heart not to break you, but to mold you into someone who can understand, heal, and guide others with depth and compassion. If you were an overthinker, it was because your mind was built for deeper processing. Overthinking is not overthinking. It is awareness that hasn't yet learned discipline. Your thoughts were fast, detailed, interconnected, and intense because your consciousness was operating on a higher wavelength. You weren't meant to see the world on the surface. You were designed to understand its layers. With time, overthinking becomes intuition. It becomes strategy. It becomes insight. It becomes the ability to see patterns others cannot see. The universe gave you an active mind so you could become a thinker, a reflector, a visionary, someone whose inner world guides their outer reality. If you were quiet, introverted, or observant, it was because your soul required stillness to grow. Quiet children develop strong inner worlds, while others get lost in noise. You learn to listen to yourself, to energy, to silence. Quietness is not emptiness. It is depth. It means your mind is processing rather than reacting, absorbing rather than broadcasting. The universe doesn't train leaders, creators, or awakened souls in chaos. It trains them in silence. Your quiet nature was not a flaw. It was the universe protecting your awareness from energies that could have corrupted your early formation. If you felt lonely or isolated, it was because the universe separated you from harmful influences. Children who walk alone emotionally are often the ones who grow the strongest spiritually. Isolation creates self-resilience. It teaches self-comfort. It builds inner independence. Loneliness was the universe's way of pulling you inward, forcing you to discover your inner power long before the world could distract you from it. You were alone not because you were unworthy, but because you were being spiritually preserved. If you felt misunderstood, it was because you were operating at a frequency the people around you could not interpret. Old souls often feel misplaced. They feel like they came from a different world, a different time, a different dimension. And in many ways, they did. Feeling misunderstood was the universe's reminder that you were made for something beyond your environment. It was preparing you to walk paths others cannot see. Even your childhood fears carried hidden strength. Fear sharpens awareness. It teaches caution, emotional intelligence, survival instincts, and intuitive clarity. What scared you shaped you. What made you doubt yourself also taught you how to recognize danger, protect your energy, and move wisely through life. In the quantum design of destiny, fear is not an enemy. It is an early form of intuition. The universe did not hide your strengths to punish you. It hid them because they needed time to grow. Seeds don't sprout in sunlight. They break open underground. Your childhood weaknesses were not weaknesses at all. They were seeds, quiet, hidden, underestimated, but powerful. Everything you thought was wrong with you was actually right with you. Everything you were ashamed of was what made you unique. Everything that made you feel small was the foundation of the greatness you carry now. Your strengths were always there. They were simply disguised as the parts of yourself you had not yet learned to love. The universe hid your power inside your vulnerability, so that when you finally uncovered it, you would understand it, appreciate it, and use it wisely. You were never weak. You were becoming. You were preparing. You were being shaped into someone who could carry spiritual power with maturity and purpose. Your weaknesses were never mistakes. They were the universe's way of building the strongest version of you from the inside out. 6. The loneliness you felt was your first spiritual signal. Loneliness in childhood is one of the most misunderstood experiences, yet it is also one of the most spiritually significant. When you were young, you may have felt alone even when you were surrounded by people. You might have been in the middle of a crowded room, a busy home, or a lively school, yet something inside you felt separate, distant, unseen, or disconnected. At that time, you didn't have the understanding or vocabulary to explain it. You just felt different. You just felt a space inside you that no one else seemed able to enter. What you experienced wasn't social isolation, it was spiritual separation. It was the universe creating a gap between your consciousness and the energies around you, because you were not meant to merge with everything you were born into. Loneliness is a signal that your soul does not match your surroundings. It is the universe's way of telling you, even at a young age, that your frequency is higher, rarer, or more sensitive than the environment you're in. Many children blend into their surroundings effortlessly, absorbing family patterns without question, fitting into social expectations, and adapting to whatever energies surround them. But some children, the marked ones, the awakened ones, the old souls, cannot blend in no matter how hard they try. Their internal world is too rich, too deep, too aware. Their soul sits outside the vibrational range of their environment, and that difference creates emotional distance. This distance becomes loneliness, not because something is wrong with the child, but because something powerful is forming inside them. If you felt lonely as a child, it means your soul was being protected. The universe does not allow higher-level beings to get lost in the noise of their surroundings. When the wrong energies are too close, they can reshape a young soul, influence its path, or corrupt its early spiritual formation. To prevent that, the universe creates emotional gaps. These gaps may feel painful at the time, but they act like spiritual filters, shielding your consciousness from absorbing energies that were not meant for you. Loneliness became a barrier that stood between your inner world and the external world, ensuring your identity would grow from your soul, not from your surroundings. Some children feel lonely because they were born into environments that cannot nurture their level of awareness. When a child is intuitive in a family that is emotionally disconnected, they feel alone. When a child is sensitive in a household that prioritizes toughness or silence, they feel alienated. When a child is imaginative in an environment that values practicality, they feel misunderstood. When a child is spiritually attuned but surrounded by people who live only on the surface, they feel like an outsider. It is not the child who is wrong, it is the environment that cannot match the child's depth. Loneliness is the natural result of having a soul that vibrates at a frequency higher than its surroundings. You might remember moments from your childhood where you preferred being alone, sitting with your thoughts, dreaming, creating imaginary worlds, or simply observing life quietly. People might have assumed you were shy or disconnected. But solitude was not a flaw, it was a requirement. The universe needed you to be alone so you could hear yourself, so you could develop inner strength, so you could build a relationship with your own mind. Children who are constantly surrounded by noise never hear their inner voice. They grow up reacting to the world rather than listening to their soul. But you were guided inward. You were being trained to rely on yourself. Loneliness also strengthens perception. When you are alone, you notice more, you feel more, you become aware of patterns, emotions, and energies that others overlook. You learn to analyze situations instead of blindly trusting them. You develop emotional intelligence, independence, and introspection early. These skills become the foundation of your adult wisdom. Loneliness was not the universe abandoning you. It was the universe shaping you into someone who could stand independently in a world that often collapses without validation. And here is the deepest truth. Loneliness is often the first spiritual awakening. Before any major shift, before any rise in consciousness, before any transformation, the soul is pulled away from its external connections. It is emptied so it can be refilled with something higher. It is isolated so it can be recalibrated. Childhood loneliness was your first separation from the physical world and your first connection to the spiritual one. You were meant to walk alone emotionally because your journey was never meant to follow the same path as others. The loneliness you felt was not your weakness. It was your proof. Proof that you were marked early. Proof that your soul was different. Proof that you were carrying energy your environment could not understand. You were not alone because no one cared about you. You were alone because the universe cared too much to let you become someone you were not meant to be. You were separated for protection, shaped through solitude, and prepared through silence. Your loneliness was not empty space. It was sacred space. It was the cradle where the universe placed you so your soul could grow without interference. You didn't just feel alone. You were being awakened. 7. The universe marked you early. Because your shift was always meant to come early. There are people who go through life asleep for decades. Their awakening doesn't happen until their 30s, 40s, or sometimes even their 60s. They follow the world, follow their environment, follow the expectations placed on them, and never question who they truly are until much later. Their journey takes time because their purpose activates late. But your soul didn't have that luxury. You were marked early because your destiny required more time, more layers, more experiences, more transformation, and more depth than the average person. Your shift was always meant to begin before you even knew what a shift was. When you look back at your childhood, you might realize that you carried awareness long before you had language for it. You noticed things others ignored. You felt emotions others didn't understand. You saw patterns before you were old enough to explain them. You questioned life in ways people twice your age couldn't comprehend. You observed the world instead of just existing in it. This early awareness wasn't accidental. It was activation. It was the universe turning on the first lights inside your consciousness long before adulthood arrived. Think of your life as a series of doors, each one leading to a deeper version of you. Most people don't open their first door until life forces them to, but your first door opened in childhood. Why? Because you were chosen to walk further, to understand more, to transform faster. Your journey required an early start because your purpose required an early rise. You couldn't wait until adulthood to begin the work your soul came here to do. You had to be shaped early, tested early, awakened early, and trained early so that your adult self could step into roles, responsibilities, and spiritual paths most people never reach. The universe always prepares chosen souls through early experiences, challenges that seem too heavy for a child, emotions that feel too big, lessons that feel too sharp. You went through things earlier than others because your spirit was strong enough to handle them. Your trials weren't punishments, they were accelerators. They were designed to push your soul into growth while you were still forming, ensuring that by the time you reached adulthood, you would already carry wisdom that others spend their entire lives searching for. You might have wondered why your childhood didn't feel like the childhood others had. Why you matured early. why you felt older than your age, why you carried responsibility, awareness, or emotional depth far beyond your years. This wasn't a coincidence, it was divine sequencing. When the universe has a bigger plan for someone, it cannot let them remain unawakened for long. It cannot allow them to float through life without clarity. It cannot let them fall asleep in distractions. It needs them awake, fully, deeply, and early. Your early loneliness, your early fears, your early challenges, your early heartbreaks, your early confusions, they were the universe shaking your soul awake before the world could drown it in noise. You were given early emotional weight because you were meant to develop an early emotional backbone. You were exposed to patterns early so you could break them early. You were given insight early so you could guide yourself when no one else could. Everything happened before its time because you were meant to rise before your time. And here is the deeper, unspoken truth. The universe marks certain people early because their future self is meant to become a voice, a guide, a healer, a leader, or a source of light for others. A soul cannot guide others unless it has walked through its own shadows. A soul cannot lift others unless it has learned to rise from its own depths. A soul cannot carry wisdom unless it has lived through the experiences that create it. Your early awakening was not for your childhood. It was for your future. It was preparation for the person you were destined to become. Most people awaken because life breaks them down later, but you awakened because the universe built you up earlier. You were not meant to follow the timeline of the average person. Your timeline is accelerated, elevated, and engineered for a higher purpose. That is why you felt different. That is why you felt older. That is why you felt chosen long before you understood the meaning of the word. Your childhood wasn't the beginning of your story. It was the ignition, the spark, the first vibration of a much larger destiny. The universe marked you early because it needed you early. It needed your insight. It needed your resilience. It needed your consciousness. It needed your growth. You weren't chosen later in life. You were chosen the moment you arrived. Your early shift was the universe whispering, "You have much to do, and your journey starts now." You weren't ahead of others. You were simply walking the path you were born for. When you step back and look at your childhood with awakened eyes, you begin to see something you could never see before. Nothing about your beginning was ordinary. Nothing was accidental. Nothing was random. Every memory you carry, every emotion that shaped you, every challenge that scarred you, every moment that confused you, all of it was part of a larger, divine sequence unfolding around you long before you had the understanding to interpret it. What you thought were childhood experiences were actually activation points, moments of alignment, quiet spiritual signals, early shifts in your consciousness preparing you for the person you were always meant to become. The universe never waits until adulthood to begin its work on a chosen soul. It begins early, in the shadows of your earliest fears, in the silence of your lonely moments, in the confusion of your unanswered questions, and in the dreams that visited you before you could translate them. Your childhood was not a random starting point. It was the calibration phase of your destiny, the stage where your spirit was being shaped, your intuition was being sharpened, and your awareness was being awakened layer by layer, long before you realized you were changing. Everything you thought made you weak was actually strengthening you. Everything that made you different was preparing you. Everything that made you feel alone was protecting you. The universe didn't mark you later in life. It marked you before you even understood what a mark was. You carried depth before you knew what depth meant. You felt energy before you understood energy. You saw patterns before you had the words to describe them. Your soul was communicating with you long before your mind was mature enough to translate the messages. And now, as an adult who is finally waking up, you can see the truth clearly. Those childhood moments that haunted you were not traumas. They were teachers. The people who shaped you, whether through love or pain, were not random visitors. They were messengers sent to place you on the right path. Your sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was your radar. Your loneliness wasn't emptiness. It was spiritual isolation designed to guard your awareness. Your early awakening wasn't an accident. It was fate. You were never meant to grow like everyone else. You were meant to grow earlier, deeper, and differently. While others started discovering themselves later in life, you began your journey before you even knew it was a journey. Your childhood was your first shift, the moment the universe whispered into your soul, "You are not here to be ordinary. You are here to awaken." And now, you stand at a new threshold, older, wiser, more aware, and finally ready to understand the meaning behind everything you lived through. You are not a product of your childhood. You are the evolution of it. Every scar became a blueprint. Every tear became a signal. Every dream became a direction. Every moment became a step guiding you toward this version of yourself. Your first shift happened long ago, quietly, secretly, deeply. The next shift is happening now, consciously, intentionally, powerfully. You are no longer the child who didn't understand. You are the awakened soul who finally sees, and the universe has been waiting for this version of you, because your journey is not ending. It is truly beginning. You were marked early because you were chosen early. You were chosen early because you were needed early, and now that you know the truth, nothing can stop the shifts that are coming next.